Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a writing that I did in 2014. It's July. So I'd just like to go through a lot of the ideas I had at the time and what happened. In the name of Allah, al-Malik, the leader, Jalal Talabani, who has been elected to the Iraqi presidency for a second term of 4 years, the maximum of what is constitutionally permitted, has held the office in excess of that which was legislated before his incumbency began, since the legal term was set to be expired April 2013. For more than the past year, Jalal has been suffering complications after a stroke, to the extent that Jalal has not been residing in the nation of Iraq and has not been in the capacities that are required for the most significant and energetically expensive office in the country, the office of the Presidency. Yet, for reasons of ignorance or incompetence, no attention has been flagged upon this issue, especially to import regard of the outright attack on the government and national security of Iraq. Unlike in most countries of the planet, there are several independently organized and armed and trained politically motivated bodies that operate in the country, with explicit oppositional aims toward the incumbent political factions of the Iraqi government. The duties which the incumbency of the President is obliged to fulfill are duties held up from the highest virtue of the country. Iraq has 32 million people, larger in manpower than the nation of Saudi Arabia. There is a critical need for investigation into the discharge of duties of the President of the nation, to observe and review performance, to demonstrate a pressurized feedback system from each divisions of the institution's power up to the President. The President's execution of official duties are crucial capabilities in its agency of functionally international theater. By virtue of presidency, it is not purposed for top-down pressure because the governing of nations is based on a constitution, not on dictation. The virtue of the presidency is that it consolidates the national interest into a practical mode for transfer of information, the role which is officially defined as guiding foreign policy, consult with leaders of foreign countries, and make decisions based for the country on the information which you get from foreign affairs, giving speeches that evaluate the country's domestic and foreign policy, and looking at the legal and economic implications for bills that are passed through the Congress and Parliament. The role is defined further to encompass the duty for taking advice and being informed on the needs of political party, which must reflect the political party agency for the citizens and the citizens supporting approval of the political party programs, to coordinate the efforts of oversight upon over 100 government departments or agencies of the government in the discharge of their independent duties. An objective review on the state of Iraq demonstrates the criminal negligence of the administration, the obscenity of the offense which is exhibited in the support of Jalal to retain such an office. These are acts of malice against the country of Iraq and against humanity, because this is a case of criminal negligence of duty, which is explicitly bound with the office of the President of the sovereign country, The acts of criminal negligence which can be brought out of the instances that are yet to be uncovered and published in a comprehensive public evaluation will be shown to have internationally proliferated impacts and influences in negative regard. These can be demonstrated as criminal negligence, and they are crimes against humanity, obviously. And in this grade of obscenity in the international politics and the level of criminal negligence, it can and must be prosecuted to the fullest gravity of the foundations of law. All praise to God. And that was written, and this is written in July of 2014. For Muslims to act together as one ummah, they must feel connected to each other. The distance keeps Muslims disconnected from the thoughts and the feelings of the brothers and sisters, and suspicion causes Muslims the feeling of being disconnected from each other. Vladimir Putin and his administration have an agenda, and this has been transferred across the administrations. Due to the law about the terms of presidency in Russia, term length 6 years, and it's renewable once consecutively, and afterwards the office holder must sit out for 1 term before being eligible to be the president again in Russia. He has the ability to reclaim the powers of the office of the presidency, and he can act in the capacity for an indefinitely longer amount of time than an American president. The Russians have generally opposed the involvement of the United States of America with the rulers of Middle Eastern republics. These are cases of ruling families or individual rulers who remain in power for decades. The maximum number of terms an American can serve as a president is 2. This equals 8 years. This is a safeguard, and this is protecting valuable principles that the nation has been extending to other nations on behalf of it. America has a vested interest in the limits of foreign people to act on behalf of the sovereignty of a country in the president's office that they are charged to. Americans are concerned with the regard of the people towards the president's office as a representation of the sovereignty of the country. Americans were happy to depose Saddam Hussein, and they were happy to trial Muammar Gaddafi and Hosni Mubarak. And in the case of Mohammed Morsi, they agreed, but they saw a danger in transition. Americans have asked Bashar al-Assad to step down. They have invested in sustaining opposition forces. Americans are in the control and command center with exertion of a lot of power over Nouri al-Maliki, despite that the Russian administration is threatening to change the balance of the relationship to the detriment of the future freedoms of the Iraqi people. The Americans are responsible for sanctions that have devastated the administration of Bashar al-Assad and the economy of all Syria. The Americans will be asked by the international community to be accountable towards the humanitarian crisis, and therefore more resolute decisions will be forced into action. It is against the American federal law, the Constitution, and it is illegal in the United Nations that any country would support a government transition that uses armed force with the intent to install Sharia law. That is because it is a human rights violation to compel religion, and it is against the Quran as well, and is against the Charter at Medina, which is the first model of the Islamic statehood. If there is a lack of feedback, you lose your senses about the situation. And negative feedback is necessary. People should take fair notice of negative feedback. There is a tendency of the leaders in the country to lose touch with reality. This is a simple matter of neurology. The neurons are overstimulated, and therefore the leaders lose their fine senses. This is why it is imperative to have a disciplined education and strong prohibition mechanisms in the high offices of the state. One must use the example of the United States of America in the review, because they have proved to be one leading opinion which is mired by many others with respect to justice. They are strong prohibitive mechanisms on the congressman. There are grave inhibitory devices which prevents the Congress and the officials and officers to do bad deeds. Many of the leaders in the most recent era have displayed a severe defection from the reality of their predicament. They have denied the warnings and unheeded signs of change. They curiously have been exhibited to be shameless about the evil deeds they committed. They act as though they still have integrity, and so does their close followers. But people should beware of them. They are concealing their insanity and perversion. There is a pattern of deeds, a showing of the consequences. 1. Bashar's fantasy that he will brutally oppress all of the political dissent. Number 2, Mohammed Morsi's fantasy that he will tyrannize the Egyptian people and compel them to Sharia. There was none of this in the Charter of Medina. Number 3, Nouri Maliki's fantasy that he will attack protesters' groups and kill them and disperse all groups of dissidents. Viktor Yakunovich fantasy that he will kill protesters and exploit perversely oppressing officials and political movements. Abdel Fattah Saeed Hossein Khalil al-Sisi, and the crimes of 800 people of once in a political movement impassioned by the Egyptian people will be met with death. Each of the officials who does such evil will be thrust into ruin by the people of the nation, because this is not the era enjoyed by Joseph Stalin. The oppression of Joseph Stalin is impossible to be recreated, although there is definite signs that this is being attempted by massive, powerful corporations of people for profit. The oppression and evil of Adolf Hitler is impossible to be recreated because the Geneva Charter was initiated in reaction to that, and in a vow to prevent ever such a recurrence. Joseph Stalin was in character a replica of the evil insanity of Saddam Hussein, the character of paranoid schizophrenia. Two different personalities. One is always violent and maniacal, and the other personalities he acts out are attempts to compensate for this overstepping of the limits done in his maniacal urges. People must be able to perceive the limits to sovereign conduct. People must be able to perceive clearly the limits of official conduct. Allahu Akbar.